Modern life offers us thousands of ways to avoid pain, and yet millions wake up each day under the weight of crushing anxiety. Why is that? We live in the most comfortable era in human history, and still we feel the grip of an inexplicable fear. Anxiety creeps in at night when you lie in a warm bed whispering, "It's all pointless. You can't handle it." It is a quiet unrest that settles under the skin. And neurosis, that old word for a whole bouquet of mental afflictions, has become almost a symbol of our age. From childhood, we are taught to be like everyone else. Education often trains us into the same thoughts. Mass media feeds us the same fears. Advertising sells us the same desires. Social media makes conformity almost obligatory. Take one step out of line and you risk judgment or ridicule. To fear being different has become normal, and yet paradoxically, more and more people suffer from neuroses, from anxieties without a clear cause, from chronic dissatisfaction with life itself. Are these phenomena connected? Excessive adaptation and inner disorder. The Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung believed they were. In this video essay, we will explore where neurosis and anxiety come from, drawing on the ideas of Jung and other thinkers, from Freud to Frankl, from Kierkegaard to Camus and Nietzsche. This will be a calm, thoughtful journey into the depths of the psyche, without judgment, with empathy, and with a touch of irony. Perhaps somewhere along the way you will also find clues for your own soul. This is the channel Procrustean Bed. My name is Roman, and I want to begin with a small apology. To soften my strong accent, I use AI narration. I hope this doesn't diminish your experience of the video. Also, if you enjoy this work, please give it a like and leave a comment so it doesn't vanish into YouTube's endless abyss of recommendations. Let's begin with the basics. What is a neurosis? In classical psychology, the term describes a mental disorder marked by chronic anxiety, obsessive fears, or behavioral imbalances. A person suffering from neurosis may look entirely normal on the outside. No delusions, no hallucinations, yet inside, they are gnawed by unease, panic thoughts, guilt, or depression. Jung described neurosis as a profound fear of life itself. In other words, life reduced to a joyless struggle with trivialities, a life one is constantly trying to escape. Anxiety is the central symptom of neurosis. It shows up as a constant sense of danger, an expectation of disaster, even when no objective threat is present. Sigmund Freud, the Austrian psychoanalyst who studied anxiety disorders extensively, argued that the root of neurosis lies in unconscious conflict. Inside us, hidden desires, often socially unacceptable, clash with the censorship of moral prohibitions. This hidden battle produces anxiety, and the psyche defends itself by repressing dangerous impulses. But repressed emotions never vanish. Unexpressed feelings do not die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways, a line often attributed to Freud. The result is inner tension breaking through as nervous symptoms, phobias, or obsessive thoughts. Jung agreed that suppressed conflicts form the core of neuroses, but he saw their nature in broader terms. For him, neurosis was not merely the residue of childhood trauma or unfulfilled passion. It was often a signal. Life has reached a dead end. The personality has strayed from its path. Jung described the neurotic as someone unable to adapt to the demands of life, or, put differently, someone who has not found their rightful way of living. Development becomes blocked and vital energy gets stuck, transforming into anxiety and other symptoms. It is important to stress, neurosis is not a fiction, not a whim, but real suffering. It may not kill, but it can drain life force for years. Neurosis narrows our comfort zone, steals joy, erodes relationships, and stifles talent. We feel guilty for not living fully, yet powerless to escape the invisible chains. Jung even called neurosis a kind of agony of the soul, a painful state that mirrors the unspeakably complex torments of the human spirit. So why does neurosis arise? Jung believed its root lies in escape from the hard aspects of life. Every one of us eventually faces challenges, overcoming fear, taking responsibility, making a difficult choice, enduring loss. A healthy psyche has a natural capacity to adapt to such trials. Painful, yes, but necessary. But when a person turns away from these demands, out of fear, laziness, or self-doubt, they take the first step toward neurosis. Imagine a young man who dreams of becoming an artist while his parents insist on a serious career. Inside him grows a powerful conflict between the call of his heart and the fear of disappointing his family. This is a defining life challenge. If he dares to follow his dream, he will face hardships, financial insecurity, family disapproval, his own doubts. Yet by accepting the challenge, he grows, he gains inner integrity. But if he avoids the choice, if he agrees to live the way others expect, outwardly all may look fine, but inside a neurotic pattern may begin to form. The unmet need does not vanish. It transforms into chronic hidden stress. Jung emphasized that the mere presence of problems does not make one neurotic. What matters is the reaction of avoidance. Many people face immense difficulties, but if they confront them consciously and strive to resolve them, their mental health remains intact. The neurotic, however, is the one who denies the problem, who refuses to see it, who flees from it inwardly. But a repressed problem does not disappear. It continues to work from within, and the psyche must expend enormous energy just to keep the conflict buried underground. How does the psyche do this? Through defense mechanisms. The concept, first introduced by Freud, describes the unconscious tricks our mind uses to reduce anxiety. A person may repress memories, simply forget what hurts, suppress emotions, refuse themselves the right to cry or to be angry, rationalize, invent noble justifications for avoidance, project, blame others for their own shortcomings, or they may escape into compulsive activity, burying themselves in work, sports, or addictions. The forms vary, but the goal is the same: to avoid consciously feeling inner pain. Defense mechanisms act like a shield, protecting us from unpleasant truths. But the price of this protection is heightened anxiety. The hidden pain doesn't vanish, it resurfaces through the body and emotions as free-floating anxiety, panic attacks, or nightmares. Jung described a telling case from his practice: a patient who tried with all her strength to push away improper thoughts. In doing so, she created an inner vacuum. And as we know, emptiness does not stay empty for long. It was quickly filled with diffuse anxiety. As Jung observed, if she had allowed herself to consciously wrestle with what truly troubled her, she would not have needed the neurotic symptom. Neurosis had become her substitute for direct suffering. In other words, when we flee from legitimate pain, we invite neurotic pain instead. Small wonder, Jung said, a neurosis is a surrogate for real suffering. Does this mean that every neurosis stems from running away from some life task? Jung clarified that life demands come in two forms: external, collective, and internal, individual. And so, neurotic problems fall into two broad types. The first arises when a person avoids the challenges of the external world, unable or unwilling to meet the basic demands of life and society. The second is the opposite. Outwardly, everything looks fine, but the person has fled from their inner calling, sacrificing uniqueness for comfort and normality. Take the first case: the neurosis of failed adaptation. Imagine someone who struggles with the ordinary tasks of life. One person cannot form friendships or build close relationships. Another cannot hold a job or support themselves. Someone else may fail to develop even basic social skills for interacting with others. Jung called such cases atrophied collective adaptation. Society places certain demands on all of us: to work, to interact, to build relationships, to follow rules. These demands are challenges, but necessary ones. When a person refuses them, real problems emerge: financial, social, personal. Their neurosis might take the form of anxious depression, hypochondria, or other symptoms of a psyche stuck in maladaptation. The paradox is that healing in such cases often requires becoming a bit more normal. Jung wrote that such a patient, in recovering, must return to their basic life duties. At first, this means mastering simple things: keeping order, caring for the body, going to work, maintaining relationships. Gradually, by strengthening the ego and rebuilding neglected skills, the person regains the ability to live in reality rather than escaping into illness. The second example, the neurosis of excessive normality. Now consider the opposite situation. On the surface, everything looks flawless. The person is successful, has a career, a family, is socially active, fully adapted, even exemplary. They do everything right, and then some. And yet inside, they feel empty, hopeless, haunted by persistent anxiety or other forms of inner torment. Such a person may hide their suffering for years, ashamed to admit it. I have everything I'm supposed to want, so why do I feel so miserable? Jung described these patients, people who possess all the guarantees of health and happiness, yet still fall ill with neurosis. Here, the root is not external but internal. These are people who fear their own individuality. They flee from the voice of the soul that calls for self-realization. Jung saw them as overnormal, hyperconformists. So preoccupied with success, roles, and social expectations, they have suppressed every inconvenient impulse. Their creative spark, their youthful dreams, their unique traits. Outward success becomes a barrier against exploring their inner depths, and the price of denying one's true self is neurosis. Jung noted that the development of individuality is just as vital for mental health as learning to live in society. Yet in our time, many are, as he put it, crushed flat by collective norms, so smothered by the weight of social demands that they lose themselves entirely. For them, the deepest unconscious need is simple but radical: to become themselves, to find their own path. This second type of neurosis is particularly insidious because it is so hard to detect from the outside. A person can spend years successfully playing their social roles: model employee, ideal parent, dependable friend, all while silently suffering. Sometimes they themselves don't understand what's missing. There are no obvious problems, so why does the soul hurt? Jung believed that in such cases, the issue lies precisely here. The soul is asking for something else. Comfort and success are not enough. What it craves is meaning, authenticity, the freedom to be real. In this sense, their neurosis is less a disorder and more an existential crisis, an inner emptiness disguised as symptoms. Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps and later founded existential psychology, gave this problem a name: neugenic neurosis. Unlike Freud's psychogenic neuroses, rooted in repressed instincts, neugenic neuroses arise from a conflict of values, from the loss of meaning itself. Frankl observed that after World War II, the Western world faced a surge of what he called existential frustration, a state of emptiness, boredom, and apathy that consumes those who can no longer see purpose in life. He even identified what he called the Sunday neurosis, that moment when, freed from the noise of work and daily duties, a person is left alone with themselves and suddenly confronted by a crushing void that slips into anxiety or depression. This emptiness is what Frankl called the existential vacuum. It feels like the soul itself is asking, why? What is the point of all this? Why am I alive? And receiving no answer. And so the inner pain, long numbed by work or distraction, rises to the surface in the form of neurotic symptoms. In this sense, the neurosis of excessive normality could also be called the neurosis of lost meaning. It sounds paradoxical. We chase normal happiness, and what we find instead is illness. But perhaps this illness carries a hidden message. Perhaps the soul uses it to shake us awake from the trance of conformity. Anxiety and depression become signals, not meaningless torment, but a call to notice that something essential is missing. And as we'll see, these unpleasant feelings can themselves become guideposts, pointing us back toward the true needs of the self. Where does this deep insecurity come from? This impulse to retreat from life's challenges? Why do some people move forward boldly while others hide, eventually falling into neurosis? Jung pointed to upbringing and cultural context. In his view, many neurotics come from families where the parents themselves carried an anxious, fearful relationship to life. A child who grows up watching such a model, a mother who avoids people out of fear, or a father who escapes into alcohol, unconsciously learns the same lesson. Life is dangerous. Better to hide. Even loving, well-intentioned parents can unintentionally infect their children with anxiety. When a child is raised under constant overprotection, strict prohibitions, or excessive dependence, they never develop the muscles of resilience. They grow up emotionally unprepared for the adult world. Jung once wrote that children's disorders are almost always linked to the psychology of the parents. In many cases, helping the child means first correcting the attitudes of the parents, because the child's psyche would naturally unfold in healthy ways if it weren't constantly wounded from outside. In this sense, neurosis is often inherited through the atmosphere of fear. Another root is unfinished separation from the parents, something that becomes the young person's responsibility. At a certain point, stepping into adulthood requires psychological independence, leaving the parental sphere, forming one's own worldview, living one's own life. When this separation doesn't occur, when a son or daughter remains a child in spirit even as their body matures, development stalls. To be an adult in body, but a child in soul, Jung warned, is to condemn oneself to neurosis. Of course, growing up without parents is a painful wound, but being too bound to them can be just as dangerous. Those who never dare to claim their own life soon face the inability to adapt to the world on their own terms. Eventually, reality demands independence, to build relationships, to earn a living, to make choices. And when the inner child recoils, refuses, and retreats, a neurotic disorder is born out of unfinished adulthood. To this, we must add the influences of modern society, which we've already touched on. The 21st century has created unique conditions. Technologies that make life easier, yet also foster dependence. Governments that seek to protect and manage citizens, unintentionally encouraging passivity, and a mass culture where the cult of pleasure often pushes aside values like courage, responsibility, and independence. In this greenhouse of comfort, people slowly lose the habit of facing hardship. The muscle of courage, the inner resilience of the soul, begins to atrophy. Of course, technical progress and social safety nets are valuable achievements. But there is a shadow side. The modern psyche is less hardened. It is easier now to slip into laziness, postpone a difficult decision, or distract ourselves with a single tap on a screen. Without realizing it, we cultivate the habit of avoiding discomfort at any cost. And as we've seen, this habit is a direct path toward neurosis. Our bodies, too, suffer under the excesses of civilization. Diets overloaded with sugar and stimulants heighten anxiety. A lifestyle of constant information streams wears down the nervous system. Recreational drugs and the overuse of medications destabilize the psyche. All of this makes us less resilient in the face of life's demands. So when reality delivers a challenge, the weakened spirit does not rise to meet it. It retreats straight into the arms of neurosis. We can now see that avoidance of pain is the central mechanism behind neurosis. Yet here lies a bitter irony. In trying to escape suffering, we only encounter it in another distorted form. A person who flees from grief or shame does not find peace. They stumble instead into anxiety and emptiness. Neurosis is the price we pay for refusing to suffer consciously when life demands it. The psychotherapist Scott Peck once quoted Jung's famous line, "A neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. When we refuse to carry the legitimate burden of pain required for our growth, what arises instead is the illegitimate pain of neurosis. Senseless, exhausting, and barren. In the end, suffering cannot be avoided. The only question is whether it will be suffering that transforms us or suffering that crushes us." The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called anxiety the price of freedom. He wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. When a great possibility opens before us, the chance to choose, to change, fear naturally follows. Freedom terrifies us with its vastness, with the risk of error, and so many prefer to retreat into the chains of habit rather than endure that dizzying moment. Yet for Kierkegaard, anxiety is not only torment, it also contains the seed of transcendence. It is the trembling before the leap, like stage fright before a performance that could change your life. Those who endure their anxiety step into real freedom. Those who flee may escape acute fear, but they collapse into chronic boredom and dissatisfaction." Friedrich Nietzsche took an even harsher stance against humanity's urge to hide from life's difficulties. He mocked what he called the last men, those who crave only comfort and safety, who avoid risk and greatness. They have their little pleasures for the day and their little pleasures for the night, but they value health above all. They laugh too, and they also weep, but their laughter is timid and their tears are shallow. Such people, Nietzsche warned, may think they have found happiness by minimizing pain and living on small delights. But in truth, this is the path to the degeneration of the spirit. Without challenge, without struggle, the human being withers. Life shrinks into mere survival. Nothing is felt deeply anymore, neither pain nor joy. Nietzsche knew what he was talking about, having endured storms of the soul himself. "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star," he wrote. In these poetic words lies the key to understanding the value of struggle. That chaos is our inner turmoil, the doubts, the anxieties, the conflicts we so desperately fear. Yet without it, no new star can be born. Out of that chaos comes renewal of the self, the flowering of creativity, the gaining of wisdom. Anyone who seeks to rise above themselves must pass through a season of confusion and pain, just as muscles ache when they grow, or as the earth must split open for a seedling to break through. For Jung, the path out of neurosis is always tied to the willingness to accept one's legitimate suffering. Instead of fleeing, one must dare to face the problem head-on, even when it hurts, even when it terrifies. If you want to cure a neurosis, you must be prepared to risk something, Jung declared. Without risk, without courage, change remains impossible. This does not mean recklessness. It means the inner risk of allowing something new to emerge, of stepping into an unfamiliar path instead of clinging to the safety of old patterns. The leap into the unknown is frightening. Yes, but refusing to leap is worse. Remaining trapped in neurosis is its own gamble, the risk of wasting a life, never touching one's true potential. And the reward for that safe gamble? Nothing but years consumed by anxiety, depression, self-hatred, and regret. The choice then is stark. The path of cowardice, which leads to the swamp of neurosis, or the path of courage, which leads to the fullness of life. It reads like the plot of a myth, and in fact, it is the universal myth of humanity. The hero must always leave the familiar harbor and venture into dangerous waters, confront the dragon, seize the elixir, and return transformed. Psychologically, each of us is the hero of our own destiny. If we refuse this adventure, the dragons come to us in the form of neuroses. If we accept, fear does not vanish, but step by step, we grow stronger than it. The second type of neurosis, the neurosis of over-adaptation, is especially delicate. Here the challenge is the courage to be oneself. A person may spend an entire lifetime dutifully fulfilling the expectations of others while hiding their authentic self. Their anxiety becomes the shadow of that unlived authenticity. Healing in such cases demands nothing less than an inner revolution. Jung said that the over-normal neurotic must undergo a symbolic death in order to be reborn as an individual. Death here means letting go of old attachments, perhaps giving up certain comforts, or saying farewell to the carefully constructed image of normality built for the approval of others. It means dismantling entrenched habits of thought and behavior, even parts of one's character, to make space for something new. Much must be sacrificed for something new to be born, Jung wrote. He called this process individuation, the becoming of a whole person. Individuation is when you stop pretending to be who you are not, when the masks of the persona drop and the true face emerges, with all its quirks, talents, and calling. For someone who has lived in deep conformity, this step feels like an act of heroism. It requires relinquishing the sweet safety of life like everyone else. It may mean disappointing loved ones, facing misunderstanding from friends, or losing comfort or status. It is not easy, but the reward is freedom and wholeness. When a person finally listens to their calling, perhaps by changing to the profession they longed for, speaking openly about their convictions, or giving creative expression to the silenced side of their soul, healing begins. Neurotic symptoms often fade, even disappear, as life moves into a more authentic rhythm. Jung said that a neurotic must choose the path of individual life which he recognizes as his own and walk it until the unmistakable response of his unconscious tells him whether he is on the right track. In other words, once you begin living your own life, the unconscious responds through dreams, intuition, or emotion. Anxiety eases, and a sense of meaning or creative energy appears. And if you stray, the old symptoms may return as a warning. You are betraying yourself again. It's important to remember that this path is not the same for everyone. Some need to become more normal because their neurosis comes from the opposite problem. Jung warned that among neurotics are many who do not need reminders of their social duties. Rather, they are born to be carriers of new ideas, rebellious creators. They remain neurotic only as long as they bow to authority and refuse the freedom that is their birthright. For such people, living like everyone else is precisely what makes the soul sick. Perhaps this is your case. You feel constant anxiety or restlessness because deep down, you know you are living someone else's life, chasing someone else's dream. In that case, the cure is clear: to rediscover your own. In the end, finding a way out of neurosis is not only about individual willpower and courage, it is also about meaning, about connection to something larger than ourselves. We are not isolated islands. When we suffer from anxiety, we often feel utterly alone, cut off from the world. Viktor Frankl emphasized that to overcome existential despair, we must discover a purpose beyond the narrow confines of the ego. This can take many forms: love, caring for another human being, creativity, a work or calling that inspires, or even suffering itself when it is born with meaning. Frankl often quoted Nietzsche, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Once we find our why, neurotic anxiety loosens its grip because the soul is no longer empty. Frankl told the story of a woman who came to him in deep depression, contemplating suicide. She had lost one son, and the other was severely disabled, requiring constant care. She believed her life was hopeless. Frankl asked her, "Imagine you are 80 years old, looking back. What would give your life meaning?" At first, she insisted her years had been wasted in suffering, but then came a realization. Without her, her disabled son would never have known love or care. Her life's meaning was to be his entire world, to give him joy and protection he could not survive without. That awareness did not erase her grief, but it transformed it. The pain became bearable because it was now filled with purpose. She found the strength to live on, and her despair receded because she had seen the light of meaning. The American psychologist Rollo May once wrote that anxiety is the absence of connection to something significant. The remedy, then, is not escape but encounter, the discovery of meaning. This meaning may be religious, philosophical, artistic. What matters is that it opens a horizon larger than daily worries. Albert Camus, reflecting on the absurdity of existence, concluded that even within the absurd one can find freedom and joy through rebellion and acceptance. His famous essay ends with the line, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." One must imagine Sisyphus happy. This was no cynicism, but a profound truth. Even in seemingly meaningless labor, endlessly pushing the stone uphill like Sisyphus, a person who chooses to love their path defiantly can be happy. Meaning is not something handed down from above once and for all. Meaning is what we bring into life ourselves, through devotion, through love, through creation. And when we do, even the heaviest burden no longer crushes us. It lifts us. Neurosis and anxiety, they are born where the soul is afraid to live at full strength. Beneath every neurotic fear lies an unspoken yearning. To be oneself, to pursue a dream, to voice a feeling, to change one's life. That yearning seeks a way out. If it is suppressed, it seeps through in the form of symptoms. Neurosis is a kind of masquerade. A hidden desire puts on the costume of illness and dances around us until we finally recognize the guest behind the mask. The path of self-knowledge is never easy. We are all imperfect. We all flee and hide at times. There is no shame in this. It is simply human. Life can terrify us. Freedom can make us dizzy. But behind fear lies the possibility of growth. When anxiety knocks at the door, perhaps we should not turn away too quickly. Maybe it has come as a messenger to show us where we've strayed from our calling, or that we are standing on the threshold of a great step forward. Carl Jung believed the aim of life is wholeness, the realization of every hidden corner of the soul. Neurosis is a warning, a signal that something has gone astray on that journey. Let us listen to it with respect, without self-condemnation, without panic. Let it be an invitation to ask, what does my heart truly long for? What am I suppressing within myself? What calling am I avoiding? The answers may not be immediate, they may take time, but the very act of asking is already a kind of healing. For when we honestly turn inward, the soul begins to speak. Anxiety slowly ceases to be an enemy and becomes a guide. And finally, a note of hope. No anxiety lasts forever. Human beings are astonishingly resilient. We can find balance even after the fiercest storms, and anyone who has walked through neurosis and emerged on the other side will tell you, it was hard, but it was worth it. You become wiser, deeper, kinder, both to others and to yourself. A quiet smile appears before the mystery of life. A strength awakens you never knew you had. And what once terrified you becomes nothing more than part of your story, part of your path. Life always carries risk and pain, but it also brings joy, love, and meaning. To reject the first is to lose the second. So let us accept ourselves, fears included. We don't need to be perfect nor normal by someone else's standards. It is enough to be human, alive, fallible, and still capable of growth. Neurosis and anxiety point us toward the very places that hurt, because hidden there is something precious. If we listen to their lessons and walk toward them step by step, we move closer to a fuller life. As one thinker wrote, "If you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you." These words are often read as a warning not to play with darkness, but they hold another truth. When we dare to look into our own inner abyss, our fears, doubts, and sorrows, it begins to look back, revealing its secrets. In the depths of suffering, we may discover what makes us real, and then, gradually, anxiety fades, like night giving way to the first light of dawn. That is the birth of a new star in our sky. That is the return to life, but at a higher level, with new wholeness and wisdom. This path is not easy, it is almost heroic, yet it is open to each of us. We are not alone. Many great minds have walked through their own abysses and left us signposts. Jung, Freud, Frankl, Kierkegaard, Camus, Nietzsche, and others. Each, in their own way, learned to turn pain into insight and fear into a call to action. Their ideas are like stars that light up the darkness of our anxiety. Let them inspire us. And with deep respect for our own souls, let us take a step toward ourselves, our truest selves. That step is the beginning of healing. In the end, life is too precious to live in the shadow of fear. Neurosis and anxiety show us that shadow, but they also hint at where the light can be found. May everyone who struggles with anxiety remember, within this darkness there is meaning, and by passing through it, we may discover ourselves. And perhaps one day, even thank our fears for leading us toward freedom.